Most founders think starting a company is a career move. Ashmeet Sidana, chief engineer at Engineering Capital, thinks it should be your last resort. In this episode, I'm delighted to sit down with Ashmeet, who specializes in being the very first investor in companies tackling technical risk. Whether you're a founder or an early career VC, such as an analyst or associate at VC firms, get ready for a masterclass from Ashmeet as he reveals what the best founders do and how to truly add value as a VC. Let's get right into it. Ashmeet, so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for making the time to come to the Founder to Fortune podcast.
Thank you, Vidya. It's a pleasure to be here.
Ashmeet, I've been a huge fan of yours ever since we worked together on a board. You are the quintessential engineer turned VC. And these days, of course, there are so many people, like me, I'm also an engineer turned VC, but you started doing this way before it became a thing. So would love to learn about your experience, your journey, all the way from engineering to becoming a VC and insights that you can share, not just for VCs like me and other people, but also importantly for founders.
Sure. So I'm glad that you brought up the fact that I'm an engineer turned VC. I like to say I am still an engineer who happens to work as a venture capitalist. I run Engineering Capital, where I'm a solo GP, currently investing my fifth fund, typically as the first investor in companies taking technical risk. So that's what I tend to focus on. And I understand that I'm going to be one of the first, or perhaps the first investor on your podcast. So particularly
The
honored
first one, yes.
because I am always the first investor in all of my companies. So I love that.
That's awesome. Please unpack what you mean by technical risk and also why focus on technical risk.
Yeah, so I define technical risk as the risk of whether a product can even be built. Is there some difficulty on the technical side? In other words, engineers would find it challenging to build that product. Most VCs tend to focus on market risk, business risk, you could say execution risk or even consumer risk, depending on the style of venture capitalists they are. Believe it or not, even in the heart of Silicon Valley, which you think is the heart of technology, technical risk, I believe, is underappreciated and gives enormous leverage to companies if they nail it. So the example I like to use to explain the difference is Google versus Facebook. Obviously, both great companies, obviously both venture-backed, both did extremely well. Google started by taking a technical risk. How to index pages in an efficient way, the famous PageRank algorithm. Facebook started by taking consumer risk. What Mark Zuckerberg figured out better than anyone else is that we like to be liked. We are willing to share our personal private information in the hope of being liked. And on the backs of that, he built a massive business. So nothing wrong with one or the other, but it's a very different way of building a business. And I'll end by saying that I'm not saying that Facebook doesn't have amazing technology. Of course they do. Google has amazing technology, Facebook has amazing technology. But the essential risk of the company was technical in one case and consumer in the other case.
Got it. That is very beautifully framed. Gives a ton of context for the kinds of companies that you like to invest in. What do you think you want to hear in your first meeting?
In the first meeting, I tend to focus on two main aspects. One is the individual, the founder themselves. There's no company without a great founder, without a great leader. There would be no Facebook without Zuckerberg or Apple without Jobs, etc. And so why is it that you are starting this company? Why are you the right person for this company? What's motivating you? How ambitious are you? How aggressive are you? Are essential elements that I want to learn about you and the rest of the team that you've assembled around yourself. And then the second is, how do you talk about the opportunity? Why is this a large venture scale? There are many good opportunities in the world. Most of them are not venture scale opportunities. So it's really important to understand that. And in my particular case, because I'm focused on technical risk and I'm at the seed stage, I'm also looking for some semblance of that technical risk mitigation and whether it's a capital efficient business. Again, venture has scaled dramatically. There are companies that will raise 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, even $1 billion to start. And so I'm only focused on one segment of that market. And I want to make a sense of a fit. Is this a fit for my fund? The purpose of the first meeting is to decide whether you want to take the second meeting.
What you just mentioned is that you're looking for founders who have a very deep technical background, but also equally importantly, you want to understand from them how big the market is for the problem that they're trying to solve. So definitely not just founders who are technical, but also people who recognize that there is a market for the problem they are solving.
Yeah, I can emphasize that point by making a distinction between technical risk and science risk. So there are VCs who like to invest in science risk, which is a deeper form of technical risk. I mean, if you think of a continuum, if you have an insight, if you have an idea, it may be trivial, as in it's obvious to everyone, or it may be the next Nobel Prize. It may be the next Turing Award. So I'm somewhere in the middle between those two. I would love to have someone win a Nobel Prize, but I can't afford to take that much technical risk. And so think of it in terms of that depth of where you are on that continuum.
I like to call it science versus engineering, right? I mean, for the most part, funds like ours are in the business of funding engineering problems as opposed to science problems, or at least people who can translate the science to engineering problems and solve it in the timeline that venture operates.
Yeah,
So
that's a great lens. That's another wonderful lens to look at.
So, given how you frame what you're looking for from founders in the first meeting, could you talk to us about what are some of the most common mistakes that you see founders making, especially in that first meeting?
What I will say is a mistake that I see often founders making right now in the market is that a lot of founders think of being a founder is a job. Being a founder is not a job. And people who approach it from that lens are going to fail. Unfortunately, doing a startup has almost become sort of routine, and people make it sound easy. And the media and the press and the way people talk about it, it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to graduate and I'm going to start a company, or oh, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to start a company. Why? Because I feel like it, or that's the next thing for me to do. That's a terrible mistake. What I like to tell people is you should become a founder only if there is nothing else in the world that you can do. You can't get a job, you can't work, you can't see yourself doing anything else. And this is the last thing in the world that you can do. That is the only kind of level of motivation, grit, commitment that it takes for founders to really succeed at a company.
That is a big statement.
I would urge anyone who's thinking of starting a company to first go back and say, is there anything else that I might want to do other than this? And if the answer is kind of sort of yes, then go do that.
What I'm hearing from you is that startups are really, really hard, even if starting it might seem easy because a ton of other people are doing so. Your point is that in order to really do it well, there is a certain level of grit and commitment that is required, often over extended periods of time. So you feel very, very strongly about that.
I definitely feel strongly about it. I run an ad on my website which is inspired by an ad that Shackleton ran when he was recruiting people for his transpolar expedition. And that's just a way of motivating and telling people why is it that the type of people who I think make good founders. Unfortunately, in the world today, we have actually made starting companies easy. In other
Yes.
words, it's easy to become a founder, but it is very difficult to become a successful founder. And when people imagine themselves as a founder, they imagine themselves as a successful founder. There
Yes.
is no such thing as a successful founder who had an easy path. That does not exist, he said.
Yeah, you're spot on, and it's very unfortunate for both VCs and founders that that is the case today. Because founders, if only they understand, they'll be more judicious about whether or not they want to start companies in the first place. There are way too many founders out there, and it's hard as VCs to then know who is going to persevere against all odds. So I suppose, would you say, Ashmeet, that in that sense, things haven't changed that much since the go-go years of 2021? I mean, 2021 was, at least in more recent times, one of those times where it looked like everyone who wants to be a founder was getting funded, and now it seems like anyone that is doing AI native has a chance of getting funded, especially if they have an engineering background. Like, has anything changed at all from that point of view?
Nothing has changed and nothing will change because I have seen this cycle 4 times now. I was a founder in the dot-com boom. I lived through the '08 crash and then the subsequent boom after that. I lived through the 2021 cycle. And so I've seen this multiple times. And when the tourists start showing up to start companies, what is a tourist? A tourist is someone from a large company, maybe a consultant, maybe sales, and they suddenly show up and they want to do a startup because it's cool, because it's interesting, and they've just moved into Silicon Valley. That's a very dangerous sign. Doesn't mean they can't succeed. Doesn't mean I'll never back a person like that, because that's the except. There are exceptions, and I'm in the exception business. I'm always looking for that one exceptional person who I think can break the rules. But yeah, that's just the cycle. That's just human nature.
And speaking of cycles, for founders who haven't yet started companies, some of them feel, am I too late? Maybe I should have done this 2, 3 years ago. I'm talking about technical founders in particular. So to founders who haven't yet started companies and who may feel like, oh my God, I missed the boat, what do you say to them?
It's not too late. We are early in the AI cycle. There's tremendous opportunity in AI to build companies, to build businesses, to solve problems that people really have. And I would argue it's a once in a generation change in technology, where AI itself is becoming so powerful, so valuable, and so useful that it's a great opportunity. And no, it is absolutely not too late.
On a related note, I know that when you have had meetings with founders, you go pretty deep in terms of the founder's background, beyond just their technical qualifications, right? I guess as a way of assessing if they have the grit and what is their motivation behind starting a company. The question I have for you is the following, which is, when founders meet you, how much of a personal story do you want them to share with you? Sometimes some VCs like to go by the deck, right? When founders meet you, how do you want the interaction to be?
Yeah, every VC has their own style and their own preference and how they want to run the first meeting, because they're trying to be efficient and try to make that, initial filter. Remember, 90% of the first meetings are not going to progress. So you really want to be efficient in that first meeting if you're a venture capitalist. In my case, you're absolutely right. I want to understand that person, to understand their motivation, to understand their grit, etc., but also to make an evaluation of whether this is a person that I want to work with for the next 5 or 10 years, 15 years, if it's going to be a large, public, successful company. I have the luxury now that I can choose to work with only the people that I want to work with, and life's too short to, want to work with someone who you don't like. And so I'm also making an assessment of whether we will be complementary to each other, where I will add value, where this person will take input, where the value that I add is actually helpful to this person. Just because someone is someone I like doesn't mean they're necessarily a good founder, or that's necessarily a good match for my fund. And so I'm trying to assess all those things in that first meeting, because that can be a good filter to eliminate half the meetings that I take.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm meeting hundreds of people a year, sometimes 1,000 people a year. So I have to eliminate 90% of them very, very quickly just to be able to get my work done.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. The name of the game is to say no as much as possible, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes.
It's very hard. And sometimes I've had to say no to things that were obviously good opportunities because it's not a match for my fund structure or the fund stage, or things like that. Because I'm also a professional investor, right?
Yeah.
I'm running a fund, I have LPs, and I have a certain structure in mind. And I'm just very disciplined about staying within that box.
Now, switching gears, Ashmeet, you've already invested in a startup, and they're building product, and the next step here is trying to get to product market fit. And as some wise person said, a long journey is seldom a straight path. I'm sure you, more than anyone else, has seen this play out multiple times, given that many of your companies have gone public. So the question is, when a company is struggling to reach product market fit, what are some of the early warning signs that you look for as a board member?
The most obvious sign is when they don't have actual paying customers or actual users who are hammering on the product. Anything other than that is not a signal. I had a great meeting. The person wants a follow up. The person wants to do a technical deep dive. None of those are signals. None of them matter. None of them are useful. And unfortunately, founders, especially engineers, are highly susceptible to these types of cul-de-sacs that don't lead to product market fit. The only thing that leads to product market fit is a customer saying, here's money I'm willing to give you to solve this problem. And the only way a founder can find that is if they actually work on solving that problem. So engineers are very susceptible to doing what I call playing house. Playing house is doing things that are good things to do, but are not actually building product market fit. What are examples of playing house? setting up your payroll system, building your office, having Friday beer bust and arranging meetings for your employees. Those are good activities. Those are good ways to build culture and are necessary activities. They're not helping you find product market fit. And you need to become absolutely ruthless. And if you're not spending 95% of your time on actual customer conversations and figuring out that problem, you're not going to make it.
Wow. There's so much you said that is just invaluable for not just founders, all professionals. So many of us play house, right? Like in the name of staying on top of emails, as an example, is a way of playing house. It sounds like you're advising your founders to spend as much time with customers as possible and qualifying them.
There is no substitute for time with customers. Actual users of people who are willing to pay you money. That is my definition of customers. By the way, many times I see decks where people list quote unquote customers, people who are actually users, or perhaps they've downloaded your software, or perhaps they're talking to you. That's not a customer. A customer is a person who writes you a check.
Yeah, yeah,
If they're not
100%.
right, if they're not giving you money, they're not a customer.
Yeah. And Ashmeet, I'm sure you've seen this archetype before, which is a founder who sounds very ambitious and has all the right background, technical background. They know the problem they want to solve. They even have a sense for the ICP, but they've never sold before. They have been highly technical. They haven't sold before though. How do you, when you invest in a founder that is doesn't even have a product, find out if they will put in the effort involved in actually doing GTM themselves?
So I believe that you cannot be a founder unless you know how to sell. So that is either a skill that you already have or it is a skill that you are willing to learn. Notice I use the word skill. Skills are things that you can learn. You don't have to be born with it. Skill is something that you can learn by practicing, by repeating yourself and doing it. And sales is absolutely a skill that can be learned. If you're willing to learn it, if you're willing to work hard at it, I would be willing to give you a chance if you are a great technical founder, because I believe anyone can learn how to sell. But you absolutely have to learn how to do it and you have to commit yourself to doing it. There is no such thing as a successful founder who doesn't know how to sell.
Point well taken. So your point is that as long as founders are willing to do it and they treat it as a skill and not necessarily something that they have to raise money to hire for, that is something that you still think would make for a very backable founder and company. Okay, switching gears now. So in this section, would love to have you give advice for early career investors. I'm talking about people who are just about entering the industry. Maybe they are, people like yourselves, engineer becoming a VC, or maybe people who are straight out of college and are associates and analysts in venture capital firms. And the question I have for you is, what are some of the most valuable things that they could do when they are working with founders?
So as you probably know, I was managing partner at a large firm earlier. So I've coached people, hired people, mentored people into the investment track. And I myself was very fortunate early in my career to be recruited by people like Catherine Gould, who was the founder of Foundation Capital, Mike Shue, Bill Elmore, Jim Anderson, who taught me the business, right? They taught me venture capital. And one of the things I learned, especially from Catherine, was that you have to do the work. Venture capital is an elbow grease business. We are still in a services business. Maybe one day AI will take over and things will happen and all that. But today, we are a services business. And to decide whether an investment is a good investment or not, because they all look very similar when you first meet them, you have to do the work. What does do the work means? You have to meet the people. You have to talk to the customers. You have to evaluate the product. You have to go talk, educate yourself on the technology that you are proposing to bet yourself on. And so if you do the work, the answers become obvious. It becomes very easy to understand, oh, this is going to work or this is not going to work. It is not investing is not gambling. Investing is not speculating. Investing is not taking a chance. Investing is taking a calculated risk where you have evaluated the odds, where you've done the work to say, aha, this is a risk that I'm willing to take because the reward is big enough that it pays for the risk over there. And so you have to do the work. That's what you have to do as an investor, and it's hard work. It is a lot of work. It is hard work. People forget that on the outside because they just see, the facade of the venture capitalist taking a meeting, giving a speech, doing a podcast. Yes, but that's just 1% of venture capital. The real work is done by doing the things that I talked about earlier, right? Interviewing the customers, understanding the technology, predicting the trends, doing the references on the employees. Call five people on any individual, and you will know a lot more about that individual, about whether what their motivation is, how ambitious they are, how honest they are, how hardworking they are. Will just become obvious if you make those five phone calls. That's all it takes.
Love that, Ashmeet. I think you touched upon so many important things here, from emphasizing hard work to keeping up with technology to also very importantly meeting people. And as a follow up, Ashmeet, what are some things that junior people in particular can do in order to be valuable at the board level?
I do see young early investors come in, and one of the biggest mistakes they make is that they talk too much. Your job on a board is to listen and understand, and only rarely, only occasionally to talk. Some investors believe their job is to give advice, and they talk as much as the CEO. Just to calibrate what I mean by occasionally, you should be talking roughly 1/100th of what the rest of the team is talking. So you should be 1% of the conversation. And if you're doing more than that, then something is wrong. Either you think you're running the company, that's a mistake. Maybe you should be running the company, that's a mistake. Then you got some different problems over there. Or you're just babbling and you're just wasting everyone's time. And unfortunately, there are a lot of investors, even some experienced investors, who suffer from this.
100%, yes. And I've heard back channel from founders say that, that kid, he told me he can help me with my GTM strategy, even though they have zero experience, real operating experience.
Yeah, this is a very common mistake because the reality is venture capitalists, good venture capitalists can give good advice, which is incredibly valuable to founders. It's just that people are not calibrated on what good advice is and how often it should be done. I believe a good VC on a board will give 2 or 3 times good advice in the life cycle of the company. And 2 or 3 times they'll give advice which should be ignored or perhaps is not applicable. And if you think of an 8 to 10 to 12 year journey of a company, maybe that's once a year you're going to give advice. Unfortunately, young VCs hear good advice and they think they need to walk into every meeting and start babbling about advice. That's not good advice.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just the calibration that is off by about 2 orders of magnitude. That's the problem. They need to knock 2 zeros off on the number of times they talk.
Yeah, yeah. And what are some of the most valuable kinds of connections that you think that VCs can offer to founders these days in particular?
So connections is one form of advice or help that a VC can provide. More broadly, the most valuable thing that a VC can do for a founder is if they can see something that the founder cannot see. Remember, they sit in a different seat. They are working very hard. Every day, the founder wakes up, their eyes are totally focused on this narrow problem that they've chosen to devote their life to. And so they are not seeing certain things. And we are sitting in a different seat. We are meeting many more companies. We are having different conversations. Hopefully, we have more experience and a different perspective. And sometimes you are able to see something as a venture capitalist, which is applicable to what the founder is doing and how they're doing it and where they're doing it. And the founder is receptive to that input. And if you can give that input at that time, it can be absolutely invaluable. But remember, those opportunities only come a handful of times in the entire life of an investment, of the journey of a company. So it's a rare occasion when that happens. But when it happens, it's amazing. It can literally change the trajectory of a company. It can make a failing company become a successful company if done the right way.
Sure. That's very nicely put. I think what you're pointing out to the fact that sometimes founders can be so maniacally focused, and they have to be on the here and now, that sometimes they may not see something coming around the corner.
The way I like to frame the advice, and I've actually used these words many times with early investors, people who are earlier in their career, is that when you walk into the board meeting, imagine you are an employee of this company and you report to the CEO. What would you say? How would you say it? And when would you say it? That's a good place to start thinking about it. Don't think of yourself as the boss sitting on the board where the CEO works for you. Unfortunately, a lot of people fall into that trap because they walk in with the power of being an investor into that room. They should walk in thinking, okay, I'm an employee. So if you're an employee, what is it that you are really good at? what is your superpower as an employee, which is better than a CEO, than the CEO sitting in front of you, where you feel you can give some input that will actually help that CEO. That's another way of calibrating yourself.
Yeah, that's a great framework to use. I love that. I mean, I don't see why I shouldn't be using it too, because I
I
think
use
it
it myself.
mentally puts you in a very different way of thinking about it as a value
I
add.
I still use it myself. I mean, I tell CEOs, I invested because I think you're better than me at this.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Okay, so switching gears. So this is where I hope we can really zoom out. You have seen a lot, Ashmeet. I mean, AI is just one of many things that you have seen in your career. As you said, you were in tech even before the dot-com boom and bust and things like that. So having seen all this across all these decades of investing, what founder behaviors consistently compound? And I guess the flip side of that, what has often killed companies?
So founders who walk in every day with the attitude of learning compound. They have to learn for themselves and they have to learn for the organization. I like to say that companies only grow at the speed at which the CEO can learn. So founders should think about how much they can learn, how fast they can learn, and how far their company can learn. Think about product market fit. Everybody talks about finding product market fit. What is that? Product market fit is the act of learning what the customer really wants and how you can solve that problem for that customer. It's learning what is the price the customer is willing to pay for that. It's learning what is the right packaging. How does the customer want to receive this product that you are imagining over here? So learning compounds exponentially. Learning is infinite and companies grow at the speed at which founders learn.
Wow. You summed it up literally in one word. I cannot disagree with that. And it is very profound. It is extremely profound. And I think also very timely for founders who today are realizing, even if they are Series B, Series C, and they had hit product
Doesn't
market
matter.
fit 2 years ago, they're not done. They're far from being done. You have to
Doesn't
keep.
matter. Satya Nadella is a great CEO because he is learning at a great speed. Jamie Dimon is a great CEO because he's learning at a great speed. I'll share a fun anecdote with you. When I started Engineering Capital, it's my own firm. I was having fun. What should I call myself? I decided to call myself Chief Engineer because my job is to engineer capital and I'm attracting engineers and my firm is called Engineering Capital, blah, blah, blah. But what was my runners up name that I almost decided to use as a title for myself?
Can I
I could have
guess?
chosen any title.
Learning
Yes.
capital?
Wonderful. Well, you're going in the right direction. I had already decided on the name Engineering Capital, and so now I'm trying to decide, what should be my title as an individual. Right? Most people call themselves general partner, managing
Yeah.
director. Obviously, I didn't want to do something boring and staid like that, and I ended up with the chief engineer title. My runners-up name for myself was professional student.
Oh, professional student. Love that.
My job is to learn.
Yep, yep, yep. Learn for your own sake, for the sake of engineering capital, and on behalf of the founders that you invest in and that you're trying to provide value to. I love that professional student. Oh my God! If you haven't trademarked it, maybe somebody will copy it, such as me.
Sure.
Love that. That is awesome. So, in that spirit, maybe I should ask you this. So, if you were starting engineering capital today, what are some things you would do differently, if anything at all?
Wow, haven't thought about that in a little while because I think I'm in a groove right now. I'm in that middle part of that journey
Sure,
where,
yeah, things
I've
are
kind of done the
working.
iteration, I figured out what I want to do, and now I just want to, maximize it to the extent possible. Some things I would do differently. When I started, I wanted to build a partnership, and I wasted a lot of time thinking about who to bring in, how to bring in, build the firm because that was the default mode in which venture firms run. It took me a long time to figure out that I was totally fine being a solo GP and that was the right answer for the firm. And so I just wouldn't have wasted that time. All the time and effort that went into doing that. Another thing which I could have done differently is I took some time to set up some infrastructure to help my founders. Infrastructure is not in the form of a platform. I knew I was never going to build a platform firm and I was not interested in playing an AUM game of trying to maximize dollars under management. I was always playing the carry or the multiple game. How do you build the highest multiple fund? That was very obvious to me there was still some infrastructure which can be helpful, and I built it up, slowly over the years. But I could have invested more aggressively in that. But again, I was a founder. I was starting on a journey, and I didn't know how this journey is going to work out. And so you have to learn along the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Now I'm investing Fund 5. It's a very different place where the firm is than when I started.
Sure, sure. As a true professional student, I mean, you are learning things as you go, and that's the way to do it. So you're living by your words here. Okay. So Ashmeet, we have come to the tail end of this. And here is a section of rapid fire. So, folks can get to know you a little bit better. First question here is one thing founders over prepare for.
Founders over prepare for. I don't think there's anything you can over prepare for. You can always get better at something.
Okay. So you're all for a prepared mindset, I hear. All right. Next one is one thing founders under prepare for.
They don't talk enough to customers.
Okay.
I have never met a founder who had talked to enough customers already. They inevitably end up spending time on housekeeping, on other things which are not important enough.
Got it. A red flag that you cannot unsee once you've seen it in founders.
If there is anything that indicates any lack of trust or an integrity issue, that's a fatal flaw. They never go away.
Makes sense. Think I kind of know what you might say, but still, what is some advice you'd give to your younger self as an investor?
I would double down on the power of relationships. I have always believed in relationships and people and the personal connection with people. But I was in a hurry. I was a kid with a lot of energy and a lot of drive, and I powered through the earlier parts of my career. And now when I look back, I would say, every person is important. The janitor is important, the CEO is important, the marketing person is important, the helper is important. Just build those relationships. Don't ever underinvest in any relationship.
Wow. I'm surprised to hear this because of so many VCs I know. I think you're one of the few people that really values relationships. So that's surprising. Okay, so this is more of a personal one, which is, do you have a favorite movie or book, anything that you want to share?
Yeah, I have 100 favorite books. Give me a topic and I'll give you a book on that. Okay, so here's a book that I recommend to people who ask me on whether they should want to be an entrepreneur. There's a book called Undaunted Courage by Stephen Ambrose, which is a historically accurate book about the Lewis and Clark expedition. So Lewis and Clark expedition is funded by the government. Captain Lewis is the first white person to walk across the continent after the Louisiana Purchase. And I think firstly, this book has nothing to do about technology. It has nothing to do with, modern computer science or software or anything like that. Yet, all the lessons about the decisions that Captain Lewis made, I believe can be related to decisions that an entrepreneur would have to make if they were starting out on a journey into an unknown land for unknown reasons with unknown payoffs, which is exactly what Captain Lewis did when he started that journey. And so it's a wonderful book. It's historically accurate, and it really brings to life how difficult these journeys are and how life-changing they can be, that even today, 200 years later, we still talk about Captain Lewis. And if you actually read the book, you will see the ending and realize that sometimes entrepreneurial journeys end like that.
Like that, yes.
People
yes.
with that ease on what happened. Those people who don't know what happened to Captain Lewis.
Yes, yes. So I have to say, I love that book also. First of all, I was surprised that you picked a non-technology related book. And it is one of my most favorite books. And for me, I think after I read that, I mean, it gives you perspective, right? More than anything else. At least for me, what I realized is, oh gosh, I'm not doing anything nearly as risky or nearly anything as big compared to these people. Like, look at me, I'm living such a privileged life. Like, what risk am I taking in life? It was really so inspiring and eye-opening for me. So we have that.
And the risk, of course, was enormous, and that tells you how much risk people were willing to take.
Yes.
And have been willing to take in their life. And so when you do a startup, you are not taking anywhere near that risk in most cases. Maybe in a few cases you do. So let me just give one decision on what I mean by why this is such a valuable book for entrepreneurship. One of the first decisions Captain Lewis had to make was how many people should he take with him? How big should his team be? Should it be 2 people, 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people? There were no constraints. He was given a clean sheet of paper. It is the first and only time that the US government has given an unlimited check to someone to be able to draw an unlimited amount of funds on the US Treasury, which is the power that was given to Captain Lewis. And he decided on roughly 30 people. And of course, famously, one woman who was pregnant when they started. I mean, wow, that's a whole decision to unpack in itself over there. But 30 people, that's kind of like a startup, you know? A lot of
Yeah.
startups, 20, 30 people, that's where they get to before, if they ever get to product market fit.
Yeah.
There's a magic in that number.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Also, approximately, it's a two and a half pizza team, I suppose. Well, Ashmeet, it was such a wonderful time talking to you. There is so much ground that you covered, which I think this is one that is going to be an all-time favorite for our listeners. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights.
Thank you, Vidya. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.